Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. In this video, I wanted to have a bit more of a conversational piece with you about tank cleaners. I'm going to especially focus on snails, loaches, and shrimps, whether they're worth it to get for your tanks and things to look out for. Now, the big first one that I'm going to talk about is snails. There are different variety of snails that you can get, including nerite, Malaysian trumpet snails, bladder snails, which are more of a pest snail, assassin snails, ram's horn snails, mystery snails, and the list goes on. Snails can be a really interesting dynamic for your tank. They can come in a lot of different colours, and they can be effective for cleaning up algae, especially on the tank or otherwise. But the important considerations when we think about snails is the fact that they actually produce a lot of waste. And in fact, I think they probably produce more waste than they actually clean up. This isn't just bad for your tank in terms of ammonia spikes, but it can also mean that you have to clean out your tank more and get rid of a lot of the poo that builds up, etc, etc. Other things to consider is there is a little rhyme that I really like to use, is that fish sleep and snails creep. What does this mean? It means that at nighttime, your snails are going to be more active than your fish, and this can cause problems, especially when we think about potentially climbing on fish, or if you have a creature that has a slime coat, they will eat the slime coat off of that creature, and it can be dangerous for both parties, which is why it's very important to do your research on what you are putting in your aquarium before you do it. Another thing that I wanted to talk about with snails is their propensity to overpopulate the tanks that they're in. Now, ram's horn snails especially are really bad for this, but also bladder snails and Malaysian trumpet snails. Now, Malaysian trumpet snails are an interesting one because they burrow into the sand or the substrate, then they can actually have a turnover of the gases that build up from your detris, and it can actually be very useful. And because Malaysian trumpet snails do tunnel, you tend not to see them as much, but they still breed rapidly. And when I say these snails breed rapidly, I mean they breed rapidly. They can be very difficult to get rid of once they're introduced into your tank. So if snails are something that you are thinking about, you need to keep these things in mind. Now, there is also something called an assassin snail. An assassin snail basically is a snail that eats other snails, and they will go about murking the snails effectively. Although they will not the snails faster than the snails will reproduce, and if you get more than one assassin snail, then they could obviously breed, and then you might have even more assassin snails, and then you just have a tank full of snails, and it's not what you wanted to begin with. So these are things to keep in mind. So I wouldn't say that the assassin snail is the most effective population colour, but they can be very useful in just, if you want to keep a snail population, but you just want to keep the population numbers down, then they can be useful. Now, I did mention this a little bit earlier, but snails are not fully appropriate for every single type of fish. I, for example, keep frogs. If you follow my aquarium stuff, then you will already know that. And the snails will eat the slime coats off the frogs. And if their babies are small enough, the frogs will also attempt to eat the snails and potentially choke. So it's very important to keep that in mind when you are picking what you want for your tank. The last thing that I'll say about the snails is that you might think, well, I don't want the snails to breed, so maybe I'll only get one snail. A lot of the snails are asexual. They can reproduce by themselves. In fact, when we first got ram's horn snails, we were told that they were hermaphroditic, which basically means that if you have two snails, they will change their genders to breed with each other, but they're not asexual. Turns out this information is false. Ram's horn snails are asexual, and that is how we got our wonderful ram's horn population that we have today. Would I say that snails are worth it? I wouldn't necessarily. Now, I've never personally kept nerite snails. I've heard that they can be very useful, but I personally don't like the look of them. They're slightly too big for me. If I was to want a tank cleaner, I would want it to be smaller than that. But in general, I just think that snails really aren't worth it. So then we move on to our second topic, which is loaches. I don't think loaches are going to be the most effective cleaners, but there is a reason why I've put them in this video, and that is because there tends to be a loach that is sold as an algae eater, especially the Chinese algae eater, and they are sold as cleanup crew for your tank. However, this is not realistic. A lot of these loaches actually tend to get really big, so will outgrow most aquarium sizes, and you will need like a ridiculous amount of litres. For the Chinese algae eater, you need a minimum of like 60 litres just to make sure that they have enough room, and they grow fairly sizable. And if you even think about things like plecos or things that are smaller like cories, then the plecos again grow massive to the point where you can even see them in Deep Sea World, which is a commercial aquarium, because they get so big. When we think about things like cories that are smaller, they tend to be shoaling, so you need a fairly sizable amount for them to actually be happy, and that means that you also need a bigger aquarium to have these loaches in. But like I said, I wanted to particularly touch on the Chinese algae eater because the Chinese algae eater is a loach that can turn aggressive, and after its juvenile stage, it no longer eats algae and it becomes more predatory. So not only is it becoming more predatory, but it is also becoming more aggressive, and that can be harmful beneficial to if you have fish or anything that really dwells on the bottom of the tank will be a target for it. So you need to be really careful when you're looking at loaches. If you are going to get loaches, I would say get them for aesthetic reasons. Don't get them because you think that they're going to be a beneficial cleanup crew, because any cleanup crew that you get is not going to eliminate the need for you to have to clean. And let me make that abundantly clear. Any cleanup crew that you get, you are still going to have to do your regular tank maintenance. That tends to be cleaning your tank superficially once a week and then doing a deep clean once a month. You are still going to have to do that to maintain good water parameters and to maintain a nice clean aquarium for your fishy friends. Now, the last one that I wanted to talk about was shrimp. Now, shrimp, out of all of the things that we've discussed, I think will be the most beneficial tank cleaners, but they can also have a tendency to overpopulate. However, shrimp are also very, very fussy, and they tend to be a bit more fragile with a bit more iffy water parameters. And why do I mention this? I mention this because in general, their population sizes are easier to control. Shrimp only breed when they are happy. And this isn't me suggesting to you to keep deliberately bad water parameters so that your shrimp don't breed, but it does mean that they are just easier to manage in general when talking about populations. Your fish may also eat the babies and it not be harmful for them, which in general, just easier to control. They also come in lovely bright colours, but they again have the propensity to overpopulate. If your tank has very good water parameters, you can get a lot of shrimp very quickly. They have like 20 to 30 eggs that hatch, and as your shrimp continue to inbreed, you will get more wild types. Wild types are just clear shrimp. They're shrimp who don't have very big, bright, vibrant colours, so it means that you might have to introduce more shrimp to kind of mix up the genes, and then if you're introducing more shrimp, there's going to be more breeding and more shrimp, and you get the idea. But in general, if you were going to get a tank cleaner, shrimp would be what I suggest. The Neocardina types are probably the most hardy out of all of them, although the Animo are slightly bigger, which means that you can keep them with bigger fish without fear that they are going to be eaten. Again, with the Animo types, the Animo need salt water to breed, so if you do get Animo shrimp, there's not a risk of them overbreeding or overpopulating because they can't breed without salt water. So that would be what I suggest the most. However, and I can't stress this enough, a cleanup crew is not a substitute for cleaning your aquarium. You still need to clean your aquarium. That was more the conversational that I wanted to have with you guys. I wanted to talk to you about it a little bit because I feel like a lot of aquariums sell these kind of cleanup crews as just a way to get additional sales, and the reality is it's not real. Like, they're not going to magically make your tank sparkling. If you have an algae problem, your best way to fix that is to actually just get less light in your aquarium, turn your light off for longer periods of time rather than buying a cleanup crew that you think's magically going to clean it up, because a lot of the times these guys do not even work on the areas that you want them to work on. They're going to do their own thing. Shrimp have favorite plants that they like to graze on and clean, so they're not going to zip around all the pesky areas of your tank and get it clean. All of these cleanup crew still poop, and they're not going to eat their own poop. They might eat the poop of each other, so like a shrimp will eat snail poop, but it's not going to be like a recycling thing of, oh, the snail's going to eat the shrimp poop and it's going to just keep... That's not going to happen. Shrimp do eat poop, but they still poop themselves, and no one is going to be eating the shrimp poop, so you still need to get shrimp poop out the tank. Regardless, that was my little rant for today, I suppose. So if you liked this video, like, comment, subscribe. I put out videos on Wednesdays, and I will see you guys next time.